freedom. Ikabu, come on into the house. Nini, welcome. I'm Queen Mother Imaku. We're at another unique cycle as far as what's going on in the cosmos. We're dealing with this energy of what is called a blood worm moon. Um, Starting yesterday and extending over the past couple of days, we're dealing with the energy of it, the intensity of it, and also the full breadth of how it affects us here on the planet. And part of that is for this cycle dealing with revelations. This full moon is in is dealing with Piscean energy, but it is in Virgo. So what does that mean? Virgo is all about the details and who handles details. That's Zashat. Zashat and also Jehuti. And because of that, it usually is a good time to be able to reveal some things and get the details straight about certain things. And I'll tell you, this is a topic that I've been wanting to deal with for a while. Tonight's topic is the Hoteps and the history of the co-opting of today's or the contemporary Kemetic movement. And I've wanted to explain this because I'm seeing so much stuff online with people guessing about where the Hoteps came from. And, there's so much conversation about some of the people who are accused of being Hoteps who are continually immersed in all kinds of drama and causing all kinds of trauma. And I have to be honest with you, this is something that goes back. It's not just something that's from today. And once you hear this, then hopefully you'll have an understanding of how things came to be. It's important to know the history of a thing instead of guessing. Now, what I'm going to be sharing today is based on my personal experiences, my information that I gleaned from elders, some of whom are no longer here, also from people who have been in the Kemetic spiritual movement, if you will, for lack of a better term, or experience, who relayed a lot of information to me and filled me in along the way. Now, mind you, I first was exposed to quote unquote ancient Egyptian teachings in the 90s. And we'll get more into that in just a moment. But please, I just want to encourage you to please like, share, subscribe. And also, if you have any questions, and feel free to put them in the chat. I sat here and I was going to record the whole thing, but I decided tonight that I should just go live to give people an opportunity to be able to post questions if you have any, or share any thoughts if you have any. Okay. So, going back to the 70s in particular, quote unquote Egyptology was starting to become very popular. Now, we were still in the throes of the Black Power movement and coming off of the heels of the Civil Rights movement. We had the door opened in terms of bringing awareness to the world of the Blackness of ancient Egyptian culture. And so actually that goes back to somewhere around close to the beginning of the previous century with the various people who came forward, but we're not talking about that today. Today we're talking about the influence that came from the 70s. So it became a thing because also Earth, Wind, and Fire had these amazing, beautiful, artistic album covers that shared ancient Kemetic culture. It's very exciting. I remember it so clearly, and especially the controversy because of the fact that it was asserting, hey, this is our history and culture. Then also you had the musician, it'll hit me later, Ra. can't believe I can't. I'm tired. It's late. I always set up to do this earlier, and then stuff happens. And so please forgive me. Um, Space is the place. If anybody can help me with that. Uh, okay, let me just put in. That's a great thing about having the phone right here. And again, please share. Let's see. Space is the place was this phone is slow. Oh, okay. Now I'm getting all these notifications, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so I'll find it. But anyway, there was a whole new level of awareness regarding the acceptance of this as being our Black culture. Now, where also did this come from? It wasn't just from popular culture. It was also because we had tremendous scholars, Black scholars, who were sharing the truths of ancient African culture that came out of ancient Kemet, the original name for what became known as Egypt or Egyptos. And see, that was also eye-opening and affirming at the time as well, to find out, oh, that was the name, Kemet, land of the Blacks. Okay. All right. So it became a thing. And especially the scholars were so very popular. You had Dr. Ben, you had John Henry Clark, so many others, some who are still here today. You know, many of them founded ASCAC, the Association for the Study of Classical Ancient African Civilizations. So, so people were very excited. And here's the thing. So as people were becoming aware of the spiritual aspect of it and finding out about the religions, people were approaching Sun Ra. Sun Ra, that's the name of the musician, and his orchestra. And I have to say, I had the pleasure of playing with the orchestra back in the early 2000s in Philadelphia. I was invited on the gig, and it was very, look up Sun Ra and his orchestra, ARK orchestra. So people were getting excited about the spiritual aspect of Kemetic culture. So people were approaching the scholars. And a friend of mine told me that he was at an event to hear Dr. Ben speak. And he talked about how tremendous and powerful it was. And then afterwards, people were walking up to him and asking him questions. And one man in particular said, started asking him all kinds of things about spiritual practice. And Dr. Ben said to him, young man, I am a scholar. I am not a priest. So then he and some of the other scholars started putting it out there saying, well, okay, so where are the priests? We've brought forth the history. Okay, so now we need to have the spiritual aspect. And see, that was the turnkey. Why? Because there weren't any priests. And so for the people who were, how should we put it? Opportunistic. How about that? They saw an opportunity and jumped on it. And unfortunately, most of the folks who did came out of hustle culture. I'm going to be honest. All right. These were folks who found that this was the new hustle. Okay. And went from some of them being street whatever. I know whatever, but I'm not going to be specific, and I'm not going to name a bunch of names tonight. I just want to let you know. Okay, I'm just going to give you the basic history. I'll fill in the names when it's necessary and when it's okay. But as far as all the names, I ain't giving all the names up. Okay, my students know. Because again, listen, lineage is everything, and that means you have to know the history. And so, you know, all right. So, and also, I didn't want them hearing it from someplace else, like I did when I came. Well, after I'd been in the culture for about 20 years, I found out the truth about everything, you know? So people basically just gave themselves titles and started doing their version of teaching what they knew or what they didn't know, or taking what they knew from whatever previous religious experience that they had had, and massaged it into Kemetic culture. You know, they didn't do all the deep studying that the scholars had done. So listen, I always say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So this is one of these situations. But we'll see what I further say, because that's certainly not my axiom. What I do say in addition to that is, see, if you can't see and you've got somebody telling you, oh, hey, I can see, you don't know if that person has been punched in their eye, if they have glaucoma. You know, you don't know. You don't know. You're just going off of what they say. So we had that situation happen with the resurrection of Kemetic spiritual culture. Now, there were those who had good intentions and who didn't just see it as an opportunity to rip the people off. In fact, credit to Baba Haru Ankh Samaj, because he is the one who took it upon himself to resurrect the Ankh carrying tradition, and also to give classes based on the research that he had done and the knowledge that he had, to the community about what, giving a better idea of what ancient Kemetic culture was about. And he also went to great lengths to make sure that there was ritual, that there was music, because he was also a musician. He was a jeweler as well, and so he provided the jewelry. And this is why also he was able to resurrect the Ankh carrying tradition, because he created beautiful Anku or Ankhs. And so he also created an initiation system. Now, I'm going to tell you, as somebody who does research all the time and who is really working to bring the best information that I can to the community, so that it's correct, and also so it's inspiring, so that people get it, so it's graspable. I very much have I have a great deal of respect for the work that Baba Haru did, because he basically single-handedly brought a practice to us. And when you're working to create a practice that is practical, that is going to help you to grow, and that gives you insight into not only your own history, but also into yourself, because ultimately in Kemetic culture, that's really what it's about. It takes a lot, when you're out there by yourself, right? Uh, um, he would walk around with his unks, and he also had prior to that been a police officer, and so he made a radical shift by becoming a full-time priest and also jeweler for our African spiritual traditions. So now there are others, though, who kind of just, okay, this is the new hustle, so let me just do this. All right. So maybe coming out of Islam, and then they just applied Islam to the tradition in terms of dress, in terms of belief, and really did not do the deep dive to find out more about the language, maybe using some buzzwords here and there, but not really delving into the ancient writings that were left behind that countered much of what they were trying to and did feed to the community. For instance, there is this whole assumption that, you've got to be under the thumb of the brother. This is what they're feeding the sisters. And also that it was our job to, without question, uphold our men and take a lot of disrespect or even abuse. And if you really delve into the ancient passages left behind by the Kemetic sages, you will find that this counters everything. That is not true. Women were put on it. Well, I don't want to say put on a pedestal. They were highly respected, is what I want to say. If you want to say put on a pedestal in terms of being looked up to and being respected, then absolutely yes. And the writings indicate the importance of having a good partner by your side, the importance of respecting what the woman was bringing, because having a good, smart woman meant that you were going to have a successful either family business or estate in general, because the women would run the estate. So that meant that they had to have a clear understanding of math, of leadership, so many aspects that go into running of an estate. So beyond that, there were also craftspeople. They would go to the marketplace and they govern their own money. We didn't really hear about that. We heard all this stuff about how women were respected, but we were not shown that, and we were not taught that Osset or Ost was very powerful, yes, but also that she was not about just trying to prop up the man and just be completely self-sacrificial. It wasn't until years later I discovered stories where she is questioning and questioning the patriarchal gods, and also pointing out the fact that the females were being disrespected, and even challenged Ray to prove her own power. Yes. So that created, along with a bunch of other things that happened, a lot of trauma in the community eventually. Now, it took a while for people to start realizing that, because we had this whole excitement and a sense of loyalty to the community and protecting the culture, protecting the people within the culture, even though there was a lot of shady stuff that was going down. You had sexual deviants who were coming and getting initiated. Okay, now that an initiation system had been started, even though according to what Bob Heru had shared with me, it was a very trial and error thing. Okay, so a short period of time, okay, that's not going to work. And people just coming in to get his beautiful, beautiful ankhs, and then just taking them and throwing them in the closet, and then moving on to the next thing, and who were not serious about living the culture, as we call it. And so, he extended it. It got to a point where he realized this is something that can't be done in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year. That to really be serious in the tradition, that you have to really have people study for years, because there were a lot of people who were priests walking around, priests and priestesses, who would graduate from the classes and then didn't know what to do. And some went on to open up their own temples and just kind of massaged around with it. There was a lot of new age stuff that was being introduced also, because the fact that people were not studying, people didn't know that there was more to glean, and that the answers were right there if they were directed to the ancient writings. And also they listen, folks, because New Age was still so new then, people were excited to be able to learn that and just be told, oh, well, this comes out of Kemet. Okay, so the introduction of Reiki and all these other things that actually did originally come out of Kemet, but the things were not being taught from the Kemetic perspective. Okay, so you're talking about chakras. All right, that's Sanskrit. If you're saying that this came from Kemet, what's the name? So I did the research for my, just for myself and for my students to find the words that related to each chakra in the Kemetic language, like that, right? But otherwise, it was sort of Yeah, a lot of people kind of making it up as they went along. And then also going back to the sexual piece, that's a major, major issue because um, a lot of people really like the idea of having a harem. A lot of men really thought that this was their chance to kind of help themselves to the goodies. And I'm not just going to leave this on the men because, listen, I knew of two sisters who were running Kemetic brothels. No lie. No lie. So a lot, a lot was going on. Folks were swinging back then too, right? And this whole notion of, oh, we're recreating what our ancestors did. Our ancestors went out there swinging, okay? And having several wives, that was something that the royals did. But the average everyday family in Kemet was a monogamous family, okay? And they were focused on the family unit, not about going out and getting a bunch of uh, um, playmates, if you will, okay? So again, people were just making it up according to their own whims, living out their own predilections, and talking about my eight. And that's another thing. It was taught my aunt, but actually it's my eight. They're out there talking about my eight, and everybody had their little posters on the walls, the 42 principles and all of that. But people were not really trying to live it. Okay, it was a status symbol. It became all a status symbol. Do you have your aunt, right? That became a thing of jealousy for a lot of people. So, like I remember after I received mine, and I was teaching at the school at the time, and I happened to come in with it on my arm, and this woman who was in the culture, she saw me. She's walking down the hall, and she's right. Next thing I know, she went and got herself one. She had a makeshift initiation because people were doing that then. All right. Now, again, remember, this is some time in development here, some serious time in development. Peace and blessings. Um, Doggone, I had your name here before. Reverend Tamu, how are you? Good. It's good to see you. Give thanks. Um, so, um, and let me just remind you all, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, many of us were hurt and severely traumatized, including myself. Ken Finity says, "Oh, I never heard it pronounced like my eights. I've only heard ma'at." I know. Once you start studying for yourself, all right, then you find out. That's why it's important to learn the language and learn how to read it as well as speak it, so that you can decipher things for yourself. Okay, and you can go back to previous videos of mine with my explanation as to the importance of getting the syllables right, because there is significance with the intonation of the vowels and what they produce. That's another whole science. Okay, so here's another aspect, because people were focused on Kemetic science. All right, and yes, listen, it's a very intricate system regarding the mystical aspect of it. And so many folks really get into the whole, oh, I'm learning the Kemetic science, or I do Kemetic science, and have completely overlooked the point of the tradition, which is to know yourself, all right, Reki Emebi, and also to better yourself, and uh, to to understand how to best serve humanity. It's nice to be able to spew forth all this information. And there are a lot of folks in the community who were doing that. Information. And listen, information is important. People generally follow me because they know I know a lot of information, right? But then the question is, what are you doing with it? Is your character improving? Have you stopped, like, cussing, okay? Especially in this tradition, because your words are everything. Intonation is everything. The way that you speak, the way you carry yourself. There are many who have understood the protocols, also the importance of maintaining your dignity, the importance of uh, showing your own self-worth in the way that you walk, the way that you speak, everything, so that you're being centered in the knowledge that you are in partnership with and a reflection of the divine is what should emanate from you. That's at the core of these teachings. And it's not from any kind of a place of looking down on somebody. It is also, though, a place of having high standards and maintaining them, but also developing compassion. And I've only, let me see, I guess about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I started talking about the fact that there are compassion teachings that exist. And it's important for us to be compassionate and to understand when and how to apply it. But instead, there were people who, thank you, I've thought of studying the language as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to teach in a school with Fundishi. I've known him for a long, long time. I used to go to African dance class. This is back when he was known as Brother Hassan, because he used to be Muslim. The thing is, when you're in the community a long time, you find out the stories, you see things, and there have been folks in the community who, there were those who we knew out and out were not right, were doing heinous things, were out and out scam artists, were deviant, and then the internet gave them a whole new life. This is part of the rise of the quote unquote Hoteps. Because then you had new generations that discovered these folks and didn't know the history like we did, okay? And then a lot of us discovered that you couldn't warn folks because they would just assume that you were being gossipy or that you were jealous, that you were low vibratory. You're trying to do somebody a favor. And I announced on my last broadcast that I'm just not doing that anymore, because people, you got to find out for yourselves, because people, you can warn people that, hey, you're running into a house that's got smoke coming out of it and there's a fire inside, and they're I don't see no fire. No, everything's fine. I am a very devoted minister, as an interfaith minister, and also as a Kemetic minister, theologian. I'm very committed, but I'm truly not going to run into a burning building to try to drag you out if you choose to not listen and everybody's screaming, hey, there's a fire. Nah, everything's good. Listen, unfortunately, that's the reality of where we are today. And it's become very easy for people who know how to talk the talk, because there are a lot of smooth talkers who are not only in the Kemetic spiritual traditions, but also in the other ATRs. And why? Because this has become a racket. To me, it has become much like a multi-level marketing situation, because people are encouraged to get initiated. They plunk down all this money, and all they want is that title. All they want is the title, and then to be able to turn around and charge other people goo gobs of money, and it goes on and on. And in some situations, you have folks who, depending on what the protocols in the temples are, and also based on their aspect of whatever ATR they're um, um, their teaching or living, and there are many within every ATR, including the Kemetic, and I'll get to that. But um, you'll have folks who are required to give a piece of the money that they have earned from their initiates to their initiators, so that the initiator is collecting, making serious bank off of all the people they've initiated, because of the fact that they're the godfather or godmother. And so, it's just like an endless stream, one person after another, and then you have the folks who don't get that protocol is important, and that just igging the person who taught you is not cool. I've seen this. I've experienced this. People get initiated and they say that the whole idea is that they're going to continue to build the temple, to work in the temple, and and even with this whole thing of the internet bringing us students from across the country, and I'm going to get to that too in a minute. But people are basically saying whatever they need to say in order to get that unk or to get that title. And then afterwards, they get what they're looking for and they bounce. And then they leave the temple hanging. They leave their godmother or godfather hanging. In the Kemetic tradition, we call the godfather the Atef Nature. Okay. They leave their Atef Nature hanging. I remember with the temple I was initiated through, and I'm not going to mention the name right now. And yeah, there were problems. There were major problems. I mean, my Atef Nature told me before he died that I was going to find out some things about him that I wouldn't like. And wow, was he right? Oh my goodness, he warned me, but I mean, all this stuff came spilling out about him afterwards. I was so upset, so traumatized. I mean, I almost walked completely away from the faith. But even so, before that, because of the fact that he knew that he had to treat me with respect, because that's what I gave him. And see, I teach that when you say anecharak, which is our greeting to people who are priests and elders, people in priesthood, priest or priestess, and elders, if they're a title holder, that you give them that respect. You say anecharak for the men. For the females, it's anecharech. But it means, it's not only saying I respect you, but it's also saying basically, technically, and exactly, show your face. Show yourself. When people call me and the first thing they say is anecharech Charme, Reverend Queen Mother Imaku, that means I better show up as Reverend Queen Mother Imaku. You can't be anything less. Don't be anything less. I created a new standard with my Atef Nature because I noticed that people were really sloppy with greetings, and it was just like, oh, Hetepu, like, what happened to the Anecharak, So for me, I made sure to give the respect to my Atef Nature. Why? Because he was the one who put the ankh in my hand. He was the one who also gave me, he did the ceremony, the installment for me as a queen mother. And also because of the fact that he was my elder. And other people in the temple stopped kezing him. That's when you drop down on one knee and you give the energetic respect. And then, the person who is receiving it also gives it back. So it's reciprocal energy in my 8. Okay. And it's very much like the God in me acknowledges the God in you. Actually, that's exactly what it is, right? For both. So, but I noticed when at some point he restarted the temple and said this space is open to all members. If you have classes you want to do here, you can. And so I took him up on that. I went all the way out to Brooklyn and started having our temple, from my temple, which at that time was known as Akeru, having the temple classes and services there. And I made sure that I pledged a certain amount of money every single month, right? Because we were all, as initiated members through that temple, asked to do that. No problem. It's only fair, right? So after a while, because this was back in the early 2000s, um, early to mid 2000s. And so, I had pledged to do $75 a month, right? So I'm bringing it out to him personally, right? And he would tell me, this is perfect timing because actually we've got some bill issues here. And so, but even in spite of that, he eventually said to me, I'm going to reduce your obligation because, quite frankly, nobody else is paying, and I don't think it's right for you to be putting out all that money. And I said, "What do you mean nobody's paying?" He said, "No, people made their pledges, and nobody has kept the commitment but you." I'm thinking, wow, and everybody else was local. I was coming all the way from New Jersey. Well, actually, before that, I was coming from Philly. And then I was coming from South Jersey when I lived in Trenton, making the trek, right? But that said a lot. And then eventually I came to start experiencing the same thing. Again, people getting what they want and then bouncing, right? And figuring that because of your title, that you'll be able to just manifest and make everything okay. And it doesn't really work like that at all. It doesn't. And it also goes against exactly what being Kemetic is supposed to be by living in harmonious balance. Yeah. So for those of you who know the controversies that are connected to where I was initiated from, I'm not denying them at all. Like I said, at one point, I was just so angry and distraught that I almost left the faith. But I had to ask myself, well, you were in the faith before him. And, what he's not the reason that you started. And you what do you believe? And in whom do you believe? What have your experiences been? Right? So even though it was painful, the fact is that I was pushed further into my faith because, one, because my elder had passed away. Two, because of all the things that I found out that were not cool. And yeah, basically because of that. Yeah. It turned into a blessing. But again, my thing is I had to hearken to the fact that he always showed me the utmost respect because that's what I demanded of him. And even after becoming a queen mother, when technically speaking, I didn't have to kiss him anymore, I did. Why? Because he was my elder. He was my initiator. And I was always going to respect that. Always. So I humbled myself easily, no problem, to drop to one knee and salute him. Okay. So what about folks who come through the tradition and don't know about the protocols, don't care about the protocols? Because in Kemet, protocols were everything. In society, protocols are everything. We have laws so that people have boundaries and know what they can and cannot do. It's the same thing with protocols, especially in ATRs, African traditional. Well, no, you know what? Any spiritual situation that you're in, you're going to find that there are rules and regulations, right? And it's not for any kind of ego stroking. It is for the sake of the community, and also for you individually, so that you know what you can and you cannot do, what you should and should not do, what is advisable, what is not, okay? What is expected and what is not. So, there are plenty of people who have said that they could always tell people who were truly Kemetic because of the various practices that we had, especially come summertime. You'd see everybody in white. We did 42 days. We did 42 days wearing white, doing a cleanse, a very serious cleanse, which ended up wrecking my health every year. Oh my God. But because of the way that we were carrying ourselves, because of people being very mindful of, of seeing how mindful we were about where we went, what we did, and also just the way that we greeted each other and were loyal to the 42 day cleansing cycle, people knew, hey, those are Kemites right there. Okay. But what about, and by the way, I'm going to do a whole other episode dealing with the acknowledgement of protocols that work and that do not work, especially after all these years and having wisdom. Wisdom is when you're able to sit back and see what was good, what was not good, and what do I need to keep? What did I learn from it? What am I going to continue to practice? What am I going to throw away? And so as the tradition has continued to grow over these years, we have wisdom. There are folks who can sit back and say, okay, I shouldn't have done this. I've had some wonderful conversations with Baba Heru in talking about the history and how he had to learn, especially in the role of leadership, what to do, what not to do, and also seeing the changes that have been happening in not only society, but also because of the internet. So people think that they should just be handed things. Like I remember one person called me, this was years ago, and asked if she could start studying with me, and she had been turned down by a bunch of people. I actually told her no 2 times, and then only because Oracle told me to take her, I took her, but with conditions. And so then she, because she was crying and whatnot. So after I said, okay, I'll take you, then she stopped crying, and she was like, well, I don't have any money, right? So, okay, yeah, you had said that, but I'm going to do work with you to help you to be able to build your abundance based on, just sharing some information with you on how to turn your personal business around, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And the idea was that once she started making money, that she just started dropping some money into my PayPal account. And so she started making money. She turned her business around, yeah, but not a dime. Didn't give me a dime. Then she stopped coming to classes. I mean, these are phone classes too. Just, stopped, and a whole month went by. And so I was just like, because after the second week, I said, I'm not going to sit here, at her time slot every week waiting for her, and she's not here. So I went on about my business. And 2 months later, I get a call. Hey, I'm calling for class. I'm like, excuse me? Where you been? Yeah, I've been doing such and such and such and such. Uh-huh. Yeah, I know. I've seen it online. Mm-hmm. You can't come back for class. You completely disrespected the time. Plus, yeah, you've been making some good money, I see. And I'm here trying to figure out how I'm going to pay my bills. Because you and a few other people just seem to think that I don't need money. And that you don't have to honor your commitment, okay? And unfortunately, that's a common thing. It's a highly common thing. Reverend Tamu just did something that was respectable a few days ago, where she asked if we could get together. She lives the next state over, but she wants to make the trek to come and meet me, which is everything. You know, we used to have to go in person to go participate in what was going on in the temple, to be with our elder. I cherished the time that I had with Maya Tefnitcha, because truthfully, I've done a lot in terms of mysticism. I mean, he was actually the best mystical partner that I had. Okay. And this has nothing to do, listen, and anybody whose mind's going to sex, what? No, that was not the case at all. At all. This man was my father. All right. And he was my father, my elder. And um, and I actually had 6 years where I stepped away from him because of some things. And after 6 years, then Spirit spoke to me and said, "You need to fix that and go back and learn." Because now, on my being on the younger end of the elder tip, still I was an elder, and I said, "You need to go and learn how to be an elder." That's what Spirit said. So went back. I'm glad that I did. So, but just to be very clear, because there were some people who assumed that I had all my information and knowledge because I was his favorite goddaughter, and that he had passed them on to me. And in fact, I did all the research, and he encouraged me because he said, "You are helping to bring along the tradition. You're helping it to grow up. You're bringing things full circle, and we need that." Okay. And so for people who were upset because they knew I had all this information and thought that I was the favored one, and unfortunately, some people were told that the only way that you can get a title is if you sleep with the high priest or priestess, and that's a lie. It's a lie. Just so you know, if anybody tries to approach you and tell you that you got to give it up in order to get a title, then you get up and run. That's a desecration to this tradition. It's a lie. And it's unfortunate that there are so many people who are vulnerable who buy into that. Their lives get ruined, especially after they find out the truth. And it's time for us to grow up beyond that. It's horrible that it happened in the first place, that these things happened in the first place, right? But as far as my experience, like I said, there was no question as far as what I expected in terms of behavior from my elders, and it was nothing but mutual respect. So because a lot of times you have to be very clear. Well, no, all the time you have to be very clear about, again, boundaries. And the ironic thing about my 8 is that it teaches respective boundaries. And so if you're not really focused on living according to those precepts, then you go do something else, okay? Because the other side of that is too that people don't realize that in dealing with the Necharu, it's no joke. You can't play with these guardians. You can't, no matter what tradition you're talking about, you cannot play. You can't. And there are people who get in it simply because they just want to find out about the mystical element of it, so they can seem like some kind of a genie or Grand Poobah, this, that, and the other, and still don't want to do the work on themselves. And that, truthfully, is the hardest part of all of this. Why? Because if you are truly living the culture, then you are forced to face yourself every day, throughout the day, and to hold yourself accountable. Teni. Okay? Going back to having to travel in order to be with your teacher. The teacher in the Kemetic tradition is the Sabai. or the Sabayit for the female. Okay. You know, yeah, I mean, I would call to check to see how he was, especially when he got sick, and made it my business to get over there and visit before he passed away. And he actually asked me to be there when it was time for him to cross over, and I was, because he knew I knew the ritual to do, the prayers and the ritual to do to help him with leaving his body and not coming back into it, and to make sure that he would be able to leave in peace. Um, that was traumatizing too. It really was, but it was an honor that I was asked, and to be there, it was really something. But again, the idea that this is not, it's not about um, uh, just if I just get on Zoom with this person, that's going to be enough. No. And as far as my practice is concerned, and my teaching, my being a the last thing that my Tefnitsur, the last title that he actually conferred upon me was Zunut, which is the learned one, or the teacher, or the healer, doctor. It's the word that is used for physician or healer. And even though we have things like distance healing, we cannot rely on distance initiations. I made the mistake, and I'm always honest about the mistakes that I make. I made the mistake one time of doing an elder initiation on Zoom. That was a huge mistake a few years back. And it turned out that none of the candidates really deserved it. I thought at first that they did. And, when you confer something upon somebody and they don't deserve it, then their lives can just fall apart, or it will just become exposed, especially because this is a Kemetic water temple. Water is a mirror. Water brings up all your stuff like that for everybody to see. Okay? So, listen, that was like, it was during COVID. And, I really don't feel like a lot of us were really in our right minds. I know I was going through a lot. And I know afterwards, especially after I saw how they reacted afterwards, right? And it wasn't good. And I'll leave it at that. But I remember sitting there one day and thinking to myself, what the heck was I thinking? And because basically these are folks who kind of like got caught out there with some different things, then the titles had to be renounced. I had it as a policy at one point, when we started with the whole thing about phone classes, and I'd started doing that back in 2011. And listen, here's another problem, because you try to keep up with what's going on. The world changes, all right, so you adjust to things. And certainly there are online classes. I've done online classes. I've done video classes that actually have worked very well to some degree. Although I'd find that there would be people who would sign up and take 2 classes because they were just interested in seeing the setup that I had, and then they would bounce and go and replicate the same thing someplace else. But for the people who were really committed, they worked out well. And then we would have, discussion afterward. It wasn't just a thing of like sailing through the classes and then, okay, thanks. No. These were folks who wanted the information about how to live the culture, how to practice it, what our beliefs were, every aspect of it. How do I make this real and living in my life? Most of us have grown up going to church, so we have our expectations about how to be fed spiritually and how to develop spiritually. If you're going to an ATR, it's deeper than that. Even though what we see in church is based on ancient African ceremonies and other indigenous ceremonies, but in a more formalized way, still You have to shed yourself of the westernizations. That's a process. People come bringing their ego and the Western mind to the initiation process. You know, even just submitting to be a student, because there are a lot of people who come in just thinking they already know everything. If I have somebody call me and say that they want to study with me, and then also in that same conversation say, and I know there's a lot that I can teach you too. Listen, it's not like I'm not open to learning, but if you're bold enough to say something like that to me, then I don't want to teach you, because you're cocky. And if you're coming in not willing to humble yourself and be quiet and learn. And I'm not saying my students can't answer questions. I can't question me about things. You know, they can. I allow them to. Yes, absolutely. Okay. And this is going back to the protocol thing, and also Westernization, and how, because of the fact there's so much information on the internet, and a lot of people don't know how to glean what is valid and what is not. People feel as though they have a right to just come at you any old kind of way. No. There have been times where I've taken students back and greatly regretted it, because they showed that they showed their tail 2 times already, and now you want to come back again? No. Why? Because of the cockiness. This is not about trying to stroke my ego. This is about being able to convey in a way of mutual respect the information that is necessary for you to incorporate into your life, and to truly have an understanding of how to build a relationship with Necheru, with your ancestors, to know what is the best way to proceed. But beyond the whole thing about learning the pantheon of Necheru, it is about, again, back to character. Immersing yourself in the ancient writings is all important. And this is something that was not done back at the time of resurrecting this tradition. And there are some today who kind of touch on it, but don't really go at it in the way that, for instance, mentioning again the church. You join a church, you become part of the culture of the church, and generally you go to Bible study. Okay. And Bible studies online, that's fine. Especially, listen, we've learned that there are advantages to having Zoom. But it's a hard grasp for a lot of people who are practicing Kemetic culture, because they're really not interested, because you're being held according to a standard. Again, yes. And in spite of what people think, there are ancient scriptures that talk about the importance of love and loving your neighbor. You know, these writings predated the Bible. The Bible, you know, authors, many of them borrowed liberally from the writings of ancient Kemet. And, you know, when Egyptologists discovered the writing and started doing translations, and they're seeing, wow, this is just like in the book of Psalms. Well, this is Proverbs. They assumed that it had to be backwards and that the ancient Kemites stole from them. No, it was the other way around. So immersing yourself in these texts and having a deeper understanding of how to proceed in the world based on the teachings that come out of these texts, that's your foundation. Like I said, just like going to Bible study. I did my toe in the water thing and trying to do the daily word online, you know, filming sessions teaching about um, the ancient books, and I wanted to see how it was received. Um, People are really highly interested when you're talking about the guardians and what kind of mysticism they can pull off with their knowledge, what they glean from the information that you put forth. But when you really start talking about um, uh, building character, how to treat the people in your lives, how to be involved in community, how to tailor your speech so that you are a person of wise speech, okay, of makeru, of justified speech, and harmonious and balanced speech. That takes work. Also, the importance of leaving behind a will, the importance of knowing where you're going to be buried, the importance of focusing on your future and building family wealth. These were concepts that came all the way from ancient Kemet. But these teachings were not put forth. And I tell you, had I discovered these years before, I'd be a different person right now. I would not have been involved in the relationships that I was in, and especially in terms of dealing with abuse, because of the fact that we were taught that Asta is ride or die, and that the good wife is ride or die in spite of what's going on, and that's some jacked up, dangerous information. I made a lot of mistakes in my life based on erroneous teachings that were given to me. That's why I started doing research, because I'm like, this can't be it. This can't be it. And it wasn't. That's why I teach research. And I started to say also with the person who came to me and wanted me to teach them, and then just started ditching class and all that other stuff. Well, there was a point that I was going to make. It left me just that fast. Oh, yes. This person, she went to my website and she said, I see a lot of things that you're teaching here. Can't you just, I know a lot of that stuff. Can't you just give me a test or something and give me my unk? Well, first of all, I have to tell you, back then I used to put up a decoy page. The classes will consist of this. And really, everything was much, much deeper, right? Because I wasn't going to put everything up there. But even so, I found out that she didn't even really know all the stuff that was up there, so, for the decoy page. But, to have that hubris, just can you just give me a test and just give me my unk? No. No. Maya Tefnachir always used to say, put in the work. You have to put in the work. Today's society has made everything seem so easy. I've been calling a lot of these initiations McNinitiations for a long time now, because that's what it has become. And I have to say, with the information I've been sharing regarding my own processes of initiations, I've had to examine what initiations were the most effective for you. Well, and also what mentoring had been the most effective. Well, first and foremost, the 13-year mentorship that I had with my first mentor. I learned a lot from her. And I'd shared last time I spoke about her the fact that sometimes she was not available because she worked, right? But when she was available, oh my goodness, it was rich. And she was just so down to earth and so sincere. But she prepared me for my journey, for where I was going, because she knew, just like the people in the metaphysical church where I met her, okay, just like the ministers there, they knew what my destiny was, and they felt it was their obligation to get me there. So I had rich teachings, not only from her, but also from the other elders in the church who were ordained ministers, and some serious metaphysicians. Back then, the church was not called a metaphysical church originally. They changed it to kind of be less off-putting to people. But when I originally started going, it was called a spiritist church, which is what people know as a spiritismo today, like the Kardecian teachings and much more. It was a regular thing for each service where there would be a different minister, because it was a church full of ministers, because they were not trying to go and put out a shingle somewhere. They got the title. They'd be in service in various capacities, whether it was doing healing work, whether it was doing oracle, whether it was counseling, so many different things. But the thing is that everybody was there. This was the home base, and you continue to learn. So because it was a church full of ministers, that meant that every Sunday it was going to be different. So everybody had to take their turn at least twice a year going into the pulpit. And even when I became an initiate, back then it was called a licentiate, because you were becoming a licensed minister. We had to have our trial sermons. We had to go, not really trial sermons, because you had to get up there and really know your stuff, but you had to do sermons twice a year. But here's the thing. For most of the people, they were able to read and channel. So at some point in the service, then the minister would go out and then start just picking up their impressions. And that's one reason I started hanging out there. Is before. I had no intention of becoming a minister. My thing was, I felt my ancestors did send me there, and at some point I was like, why'd y'all send me here? I learned so much, and getting your own personal message, people picking up on different things your spirit guides are saying, or your ancestors, and especially for stuff that you really needed at that time. It was so rich, so rich. And then also we had healing at every service. They would put 6 chairs up in the front of the church, and then again alternating. 6 of the ministers would go and would stand behind a chair, and you could go and sit down whatever chair you were drawn to, or whoever you wanted to work with you, and they would do healing work on you, whether they specialized in using Reiki, whether it was using color therapy, because they had these color patches that you could use. They had a bowl full of tools for the ministers there. So there were healing stones, there were oils, there were color patches for you to apply to a person. So, try to do healing work with them with that. This was every service. And it was a regular church service. Okay. We had our songs, and we had our message. We had our healing session, and, also they would, the minister would bring forth whatever prophecies they had. It was rich. And this is where my mentor came out of. So to have advice given to you, not only from your mentor who worked with you closely, and I still have the rose quartz heart. And oh my goodness, I'm just now realizing the significance of her giving me a heart, because the fact that it factors in so many ways into what I'm supposed to be doing. And also the heart is strongly associated with many of my guardians. But anyway, the fact that she gave me hands-on training. She was a teacher not only in the church, but she would come to my house, right? Or we would go to the park and do something. And we spent time on the phone. But it was a wonderful personal relationship. And she wasn't like some mystery to me. And she let me see her human side. She never tried to pretend that she was something more than she was, but she was something. Really. And she was initiated into a number of traditions. And she ultimately brought me to her elder. This was like a big surprise after 13 years. I didn't even know this person. And after I'd gone through my second level of initiation as a high priestess with her, that's when she brought me to her elder after that. And this woman, then it turned out she was the um, part of the Black Irish who came from Kemet, and her lineage was of the Nubian handmaidens that came from Kemet. This is the energy this woman passed on to me. This was the reward that I had for sticking it out all those years. Because sometimes I would be sitting in the church and I'm like, there are only 3 Black folks here. One of them got kicked out. But I'm sitting there like, why y'all have me here? Even though I was getting all of that wealth of experience and knowledge, right? And it all ended up paying off. You know, the last time we were on, I talked about the importance of understanding when you should hang in there. Okay. In fact, there is a lesson in, which book is that? One of the sacred books that talks about not leaving the room, knowing when not to leave the room. When you're invited into a special place, a place that you've perceived as being above you, but you're welcome in. Why? Because it's the time and because of where you're going. And not quitting. You know, don't make an excuse and say, you know, oh, I have to go wherever, you know, and you miss out on all the folks who are going to take you to the next level because they're on a different echelon, and you punk out either because you don't understand what's going on, or because you're feeling a sense of unworthiness, or you're feeling uneasy because you can't control the situation. But everything inside of you is saying, no, don't leave. Don't leave. I'm not talking about situations where there's something shady going down and everything is telling you, no, you better leave. Okay. I'm talking about when you are facing your legacy and your destiny. And when it's important to understand, okay, this is my next step. Don't leave the room. So because of that, all that I went through with my 13-year mentor, that comes to mind first. And I've tried to apply that same level of relating to my students when, you know, I've tried to apply the same tenets of in dealing with my students in terms of being as accessible as I can be, also encouraging them to grow, and also to make sure that I am as transparent as I possibly can be. And then also, I want to say that I had the same experience with the folks who were in that church, and the ones who had the most juice were the most humble. Flannel shirts, you know, okay? I mean, one powerful teacher that I had, she taught the world religions class. Once I accepted, okay, yeah, I'm going to answer the call, all right, and become a licentiate. So you had to take world religions. She was a waitress. She was an elder. She was a waitress, and she one of the most knowledgeable people I'd ever met, ever. The other person who was really knowledgeable besides my mentor, he was a waiter. He was a waiter. And man, so these were not people going around trying to show off what they knew. They were confident in what they knew, but they were humble about what they knew. And they were tremendous teachers, tremendous. So that's the first thing that I thought about. And the fact that I had that full span of time. And in that, you get to know them or your mentor or mentors, and they get to know you. I invited these folks to my house for parties and stuff, um, and vice versa. So you get to know them on a real level, and um, also the intensity of their teachings was great. So then after that, my expectation in going into ATRs was the same, and it wasn't at all, not at all. And I have to say, my mentor, she warned me. Um, she warned me to be careful. And she said, this is a necessary part of your journey, but no, it's not going to be like what you came from. People are going to have a different set of values or no values. And it's going to be a difficult road, but it's one you have to take because this is part of your destiny. Wow, was she on point with that? Really on point. I've learned it's difficult when you have one set of values and then you're dealing with people who either lack values or see things in a different way. And so I want to say that what I came to find was that people brought their street ethics into ATRs. Now, let me clarify on that. Okay, let me just clarify that. Like there's somebody in the ATR community who is an amazing Ogun in a few different traditions. He knows his stuff. I mean, really. And I'd mentioned one time recently about how with people who claim to be Kemetic, but then they cuss like a sailor, it's not consistent with our beliefs and practices. But I have to say, with this particular Ugan, he cusses like a sailor. He's not in our tradition, okay? He's in other traditions, one of which I'm also in. But he's very clear. Listen, I'm from the hood, okay? He says, and I'm not saying that's like an excuse, but he also does some really serious mystical work. And I can't hold Kemetic standards to someone who basically has to really get down on a regular basis to help people and in helping to shift our energy around, because that's some real hard work. I mean, it takes a lot out of you, and I know this for myself. But this is what this person does full time. So I can't be critical about the fact that he cusses like a sailor. He knows his stuff. He is a really very highly respected practitioner and teacher in his level of the ATRs, right? So I give it up to him because he is not bringing street ethics to these highly ethical practices. He's very clear on teaching what is acceptable and what is not. He has a very strong line, and it's because of that he is so powerful. Okay, it's just different. It's just different. But when I entered the Kemetic faith, I found that there were a lot of people, and other ATRs too, but there were a lot of people who, as I'd said, found, hey, this is the new hustle. So they didn't go through learning ethics. It was all about just learning the mechanics so they could turn around and become priests themselves and start making a lot of money. Our approach is not that, okay? Not at all. So that made it tough. Another thing I want to say in terms of positivity, I do want to say that I appreciate the hands-on approach regarding my no pun intended. But regarding Maya Tefnechur, because um, I was able to see. I was able to see how he conducted ceremony. I was able to see how he counseled people. I was able to, I mean, just so many things that were really vital to not only my practice, but also my becoming an elder, my being an elder, right? And I highly respected the fact that whether person was a streetwalker or a Wall Street banker, that everybody gave him respect, high respect. They would stop, and because he had a little, the temple space was like a healing space as well, and people could just drop in and just kind of sit, listen to the meditation music, get cleansed from the incense, and just chill, you know, to kind of recalibrate themselves. But there was a glass window because it was a storefront originally, right? So people would see him and they would, I mean, bow to him, just average people, you know, or blow kisses at him or be like, hi, how you doing? You know, I mean, they went out of their way to greet him, and he likewise. And, you know, there was a regular guy, it was a brother who he had some challenges, and he would routinely come in and try to offer to sell him something, you know, and so my Tefnature would just like give him money or just buy it or whatever, you know, and you just whip it out, just, you know. And that left a strong impression on me, because in the Kemetic teachings, it talks about the importance of being able to respect everybody, right? And to not be elitist. Again, living according to a high standard, but not being a snob. And I will say, yes, in the Kemetic faith, we've been accused of being snobs because of the standard thing, all right? But see, a lot of people, once they become initiated, get these swelled heads. They get the swelled heads and think they don't have to answer to anybody. And they will look down on folks because they have a title. And that's not right. It's not cool. So Alexa says microwave gurus. Yeah. And she says, Western culture seduces us into wanting the prize without running the race. Oh, that's good. That's perfect. That's exactly it. Listen, I showed up to the track. Where's my prize? You haven't broken a sweat, okay? You haven't even put your sneakers on. You show up in your high heels or in your sandals and just expect that, you know, people are going to be excited just because you showed up and just feel entitled to entitlement. That's the biggest word. Many people feel a sense of entitlement. And a lot of it is because they don't understand. No. When they come to understand, for people who are like really, really invested in their traditions, when they understand they got to put in the work, then they realize that entitlement thing is out the window. You have to earn. Listen, in ancient Kemet, actually in all the ATRs, there had been a general framework. And I remember somebody drawing an example for me when I was thinking about joining this Egbe, this Yoruba family, Yoruba, you know, temple. Well, the Ile is the temple, the Egbe is the community. But anyway, so he drew a series of circles for me to help me understand. And I've seen that in a number of places. And so you have, I don't know how well you can see this. All right, so the inner core right here, that's the priest or priestess, the Ugan, the Maman, the head minister, right? The Yanifa and Babalao, they're in the center here. This represents their inner core, right? Then out here, You've got those who may be studying in, to become priests. But then you have the general population that's like here or out here. And you got to work to get your way into the first tier, which would be the equivalent of becoming a member of a church. But first, they want to know who you are. The standards are different. They're there, but they're different. And you're not let in to the next tier until you've done the work and earned your way in. Why is that? Because in here, that's where the richest secrets are, the deepest information. And then these people here, they would be like the high priests and priestesses. And they have immediate access to the hierarchy here, the top of the hierarchy. And they're protective also of the hierarchy and of the information. Why? Because when you learn from these various ancient traditions, if you're not ready, it's like putting a gun in a baby's hands. People don't understand these. It's a process. It's a process. You wouldn't put a kindergartner in college. It's a process. See, so when you're out here and then you're accepted here, and there are many more circles, but this is just the most immediate thing because I have an index card here. But you have to learn the culture. And first of all, they have to make sure you're not some nut. Okay, coming in. That doesn't always work out because some people start their own temples and they're not all there. But even so, the idea is that they want to protect the community. You have an established house here, established temple and established community. So learning the lingo, learning the protocols. Okay, there's a certain way you address this altar. There's a certain way you address this altar. So like when you join a church, you learn you can't come in there looking like you just came from the beach. Now things have become more relaxed than they were when I was coming up, but still the idea is you still know you're not going to come out there with all this hanging out and everything, and you can't come in sagging and all this. You can come in with casual clothes. Many churches design it that way so you can be comfortable. And then there are special days, right? Because they're more aware of the times, and that they'll be able to get more people who feel comfortable in coming to church because they don't feel the pressure of not having nice, expensive clothes to wear. So I think that's actually a smart thing. But in African tradition, you're trying to de-Westernize. Now, many of you have noticed, I'm sure, that a lot of us have embraced African jewelry and clothing. And that's something that started from the late 50s, actually. And it was a way of being able to say, okay, y'all ripped us from the motherland. And back then, especially, people were not really keyed in on where they could possibly be. They want the DNA tests and so forth. But the idea being, though, like, okay, listen, I'll claim it all. Okay. And I'm going to eschew my Western attire. I'm going to get rid of my what was then called a slave name, your birth name. And so a whole other culture was started in the along with and then following the movement in order to assert the African identity that was taken from us, even though there are so many things still present in Africanisms that have endured with Black people in this country and other parts of all over the diaspora. Okay, you can find Africanisms there that have continued because of culture, and then also because something ancient speaking to us, and a lot of times doing things you're not even aware of the fact that it's connected to whoever your people were. And then also there was an expansion on just the idea of embracing all, because also here we were a melting pot. Listen, when our ancestors were taken from the motherland, in the Caribbean, they were taken as whole groups. So you had these, because you had the Eve, we'll take, the idea was, whether Yoruba or whatever, whatever part, the idea, they figured that, okay, well, they'll be happier if they can speak the same language, and we'll get more work out of them, if they all have the same culture. Not so here in the US. Here, we were just, here and here and here, just bunches of us from different parts of the motherland. And so our culture became a shared culture with commonalities, but also with differences. And with African American culture, it emerged into something else. And especially for those of us who have gone out of our way to reclaim the beliefs and principles and traditions of the motherland. So that's why, a friend of mine said that when he's referred to me, he said usually that I have touches of the motherland on me every day, and that's true. Doesn't mean I have to be in like full garb or anything like that, but still just something of a cultural reminder, and also to help to inspire other people, right? But also to say, yeah, I'm bold enough to be able to live the culture. You can try to take it, but you really haven't. Okay. Ultimately, the culture is not, though, the externals. It's all about what's up in here. So now, let's talk about the Hoteps. No, wait, before we do that, let me just finish about this. Because in Kemet, listen, they had temple, but it was not like church. They had places where people could stand outside. And many people couldn't read, so they had a symbol of the rekit bird to let people know, which meant the common folk, the people. They saw that on the pole, okay, we can stand here, this area. And they would be out in this courtyard. But the temple itself was all over in here. So maybe they were standing out here. Okay, let's do it this way. So they were standing out here. And maybe a message would be brought out, or they would all do a ritual together. Maybe they would have a chance to talk to the oracle. Okay. But then after that, it was like, okay, bye, y'all. The priesthood would go into the inner sanctum. The inner sanctum was actually at the very back of the temple. So in the same way that, you have the different levels, certain priests could not go beyond here. Okay. You had to be a high priest or priestess to be able to go back here. And you couldn't just show up and say, hey, I want to do this. I want to be this. No, you had to be either called to it, or actually it was inherited. Then you see, we have generations now of people who are very heavily involved in church or in politics or in, as a minister. Why? Because this was what the family did, and this was the calling that was upon the family. Yes, that's true. So, it wasn't like today where, you're like, wow, I've been watching this podcast for a while, and this sounds pretty interesting. I think I'm going to give this a try. And then you say, yeah, you know what I'm going to do? Yeah, I'm going to become a priest, and thinking, no, well, actually, let me just clarify this, because ideally you should be given a lot of time to learn. But there are people who want it now. And there are people in the motherland who are glad to take your money and give you this whatever little ceremony that, or big elaborate ceremony, depending on how much money you're plunking down and how much you want to be convinced that that this is the real thing. And you go, you get your title, and you come back, and then you put out your shingle without really knowing anything. you know that's not true for everybody. There are people who go and have established relationships with the various babalao, um, and learn and become initiated in what I would call the right way. Okay, just like having learned that when I was initiated in the water tradition, in the Shona and the Bele tradition, which I've shared, the first one was amazing. It was like a movie. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. And the relationship that I had with my um, 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 initiator at the time, Don Miguel Ortiz Hill, we had a really loving relationship. And because we saw a lot of mistakes that were made, we realized that this had to be honed. And before he passed away, because he is now an ancestor, he passed away a couple of years ago, we had a lot of really intense talks about what we needed to do to change the initiation process, because too many people took it for granted. Too many people looked at it as like a touristy thing. Too many people, well, here's what it was. It was presented that all you had to do was get baptized, be immersed 3 times, and then you came out and you were an Anga. I had some different mystical experiences that happened to me. I had some really intense. Go back and watch, okay, regarding that. And also I was bringing a wealth of my own experiences as already as a 3 times initiated, 4 times initiated priestess, as a queen mother, as a scholar, as a teacher, and as a healer. I was bringing all of that and my destiny calling to the tradition. So I found out afterwards what happened to me was not something that was typical at all of anybody else. And Michael Don Miguel didn't even go through the things that I went through. But even so, in recognizing the fact that there are a lot of people who just would get initiated and wouldn't appreciate it and didn't take the calling seriously, because you're called to be a healer for your community, that it had to be changed. So that's those last conversations that we had were about what we need to do to make those changes, because this is serious work, and because it's something you should not take for granted, and especially because, again, we're talking about the water. You really, really, really can't play with water spirits. I mean, really. And when you walk away from your calling as a Nanga, I've seen people's lives just fall completely to ruin. In some cases, it's not good for the person who initiates them, because of the fact that your energy is tied to theirs. So they mess up and you don't understand why all of a sudden things are falling apart in your life. I've seen a lot. This one woman, she didn't follow through on a lot of different things, and got really cocky and disrespectful toward me. But I was like, you know what? Everybody's got their walk, right? But instead of fulfilling some commitments to her community, at that point, she was living someplace where there was a huge water crisis, and she was commissioned to do a certain thing in order to help with the issue with the water in that area. she bounced off and got initiated in the whole other tradition, which would have been fine if she had fulfilled her obligation. And so her life just started falling to ruin. And she called me one time and said she was in town and she wanted to come and stay over. I was out of town. I was enjoying being with my friends and chilling, being on my priestess vacation time. And here now you're telling me you want me to come all the way back to Newark in order to play hostess to you. Well, see, back then I didn't know better. I thought I had to because she was my godchild and because I was a minister, and that I thought that meant that I could not establish any boundaries and say, what the heck you talking about? I'm on vacation. I'm supposed to drop everything because you bopped into town and you brought a guest with you? I did. I left. I was so ticked off. I left the comfort of my friend's home where I would go every year for the holidays. Cut my vacation short, went all the way back to Newark, and good Lord, she was a rude guest. Both of them were. And I didn't say anything. But then a bunch of stuff happened. A bunch of stuff. She came back another time. Still didn't even fulfill the obligations that she was supposed to fulfill. Okay. Okay. Now she wants me to go with her out of state to a special event. And she wanted to stay over. And she also, again, brought a guest who drove her. She conned him into driving from, what was it, like 6 states away, all the way, and she was even worse. Her attitude was even worse. And we ended up going to the event. I'm seeing her talking to her friend like he's dirt, and she's talking to me like dirt. So we go to the event. She's got this paperwork. Okay, because it was something else that she signed up for with another tradition. And we come back to my place. It's pouring buckets. All of a sudden, this rainstorm just came out of nowhere. Don't play with the water spirits, okay? So she's got this attitude and blah, 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 blah. And her friend was being very patient too. So, he says, he opens her back door, because, she sat in the back. You need any help getting out? No, I don't need any help. Okay. And she had the paperwork for this other thing that she was involved in now, right? It was on her lap. I swear to you, it looked like somebody had just taken a hand, slid it underneath, lifted it up, and dropped it into a puddle. I swear. If I had not seen it with my own eyes. And she's like, ow, 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 And her friend and I looked at each other like, he said, did you see that? I said, yeah. Yeah. So she leaves, she goes back home, and she finds that she's locked out of her apartment. All her stuff's on the sidewalk. Her relative that she was staying with put her out. Okay. Then a bunch of other things happened. And then she'd even experienced at the beginning of all this where she had gotten sick unto death. So one day I get a call. Queen Mother, I'm going to the water. I said, okay. Finally, it was kind of like this. Okay, I give. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go to my altar and pray with you. And she was doing what she needed to do to fulfill the rest of the obligation, because it took, this is over the course of maybe 2 years. 2 years. Yeah. So, and then you have those who definitely take your kindness for weakness, where they owe you, but then they go off and get initiated someplace else where they've plunked down all this money, thousands of dollars. Okay. And I'm going to tell you something. It's really unfortunate that this is a common story. This is what how the culture has developed. Because also there are people who are coming and again bringing their lack of ethics or their street ethics to it and thinking that they can get over. A lot of it is get over mentality. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily have to be even street ethics, okay? Because I mean, listen, you have corporate crime too, right? So I'm just saying, people who come thinking that they can just make this what they want it to be, that's convenient for them, and that they don't have to change. So the Hoteps. This is a continuation of this being a hustle, doing the culture hustle for people, not living lives that are exemplary, trying to make people feel less than because they know that they're coming to people who don't really know as much. And they get themselves kind of put on this pedestal as a guru, when in truth, they haven't really earned that respect. But they're collecting money, collecting money, collecting money. Or you have those who are just the know-it-alls. They'll be very glad to tell you, oh no, this is not true. Blah, 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 blah happened and blah, blah, blah. And they may be, sharing some historical truths that they have learned. But you know how it is, like when you're new to something and you just want to convert everybody. It takes you a little while to chill out and realize you're coming on too hard. There are folks who stay in that mode. They feel like it's their role to beat you over the head with information and to make you feel insecure about your lack of awareness. And then they also question you on what did I call it? There are these definitions of blackness, right? There are folks who very happily berate someone who was educated and make them feel as though they're sellouts, and basically do that in order to try to guilt them out of money, or most of all, to make them doubt themselves and their own intuition, so that folks don't want to be ratted out. Basically, they don't want to be. They don't want their they don't want to be shown for the liars that they are. And anybody who's smart enough to pick up on it, or also people who are very psychic, these folks will go out of their way to do what they can to beat you into submission, including using juju against you. I know juju is a controversial term, whether it's positive or negative. To me, it's a positive term. In terms of understanding what it means regarding African mysticism. I know it was used as a negative term at some point, but I see it as a positive term, because we understand that it relates to the use of energy, and it's all about people's intention. So there are people who will negatively use energy in order to trip somebody up just to protect their own identities, right? Then you have those who are always, they put themselves in circumstances where they're the smartest one in the room. Again, spewing information, and it's not always the truth, and it's not coming from a scholarly standpoint. There are a lot of urban legends that are spun in these situations. And so, the idea of with many of these scammers is that they just want to keep you in a state of being perpetually insecure. The sky is falling. Okay. Um, that's a problem because then you disconnect from your intuition. You disconnect from your reason, your sense of reason, you know, and it just helps for this other person to continue running whatever scam. The Hoteppers are also known, the Hoteps are also known for um, um, causing a lot of division. You know, there's a Kemetic axiom that's in Dendera. It says, man's delusion is that there is disunion amongst them, but in truth, we are one. For a tradition that is supposed to be about harmony, reciprocity, balance, justice, higher love, there's a lot of hate that's taught. Now, I'm not saying that we can't remember, hearken to, and teach our history. We have the right to do that. But in the book of Ankh-Shushanki, it says, may I know my brother and sister so that I may share my goods with them. You know the saying, your skinfolk ain't always your kinfolk. You have to know people from a heart place, from an intention place, and to know who's really there for you, who's really in your corner, and not to exclude somebody from um, um, from your life based only on externals. Kemetic teachings don't promote that. They don't. And yes, we have a right to protect our culture. We have a right to protect our communities, our families, but we should not cast blanket judgment. You know, I also wanted to share, just for clarity, because there are many of us who are in a couple different traditions. Why is that? So let me say this. There will be times when there is a generational obligation that has to be filled based on a, I don't want to say pact because it's such a strong word and it brings about, you know, negative notions, but let's just say obligation that goes back many generations. And this is something that is born in the blood, something that is inherited regarding a certain practice. Maybe it is for the appeasement of certain ancestors so that they can move forward. Maybe there have been some energies that have been attached to your family and not in a good way because of an erroneous practice from either various family members or one. And now you're stuck with a whole bunch of negative energy and horrible things that happen simply because nobody is addressing this attachment. And there are times where being able to get initiated into the particular system that this entity is from is the only way to eradicate it, to deal with it, and to be able to elevate the family. Also, there are folks who are sort of ATR snobs and don't understand why families have gone to the Abrahamic traditions as opposed to being in the original African traditions. Well, you might have had generations and generations of some really jacked up things that have happened because of abuse and misuse of traditions. And perhaps this is your family's way of elevating in order to pull away from that. And you have to also understand, this is a Kemetic principle too, but also across many traditions, that when you do positive work, that it helps to elevate your entire bloodline. It helps you, but also those who are looking to go deeper into the light. For those who are in darkness, you have to understand that it's important to just pray for them and don't call on them. All right? There's the distinction. If your work is to bring your family to a different level, to bring yourself to a different level, and if going that route, either way, whether it is through the Abrahamic faiths or through ATRs, whatever, then that's your business. It's your business. Nobody else should judge you for that. And you shouldn't judge somebody else because of the path that they're taking. That's their calling, their decision. Okay? And it's also important for people who are in the Abrahamic faiths who don't understand when we're in the ATRs, for them to not judge, because given the scenario that I gave you regarding the whole thing about having some negative attachment that has become permanently affixed to your bloodline, and you've got people, literally folks, whole groups just mysteriously dropping dead, or this relative, we've got elders who have outlived all of their children who mysteriously drop dead. Listen, when you have someone who is willing to make the sacrifice to go and fix that, to take up that tradition that you may be judgmental about, and take on that issue in order to fix it, there should be gratitude. This goes back to what I was saying about not understanding everything. We don't know everything that's going on. Well, do my Bodunginan initiation, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is not my plans. That's a whole other story for how that came about. But I mean, but I got to see that it was something that my ancestors guided me toward, because there was stuff I needed to be able to experience to understand many of the unspoken things that had taken place in my family. I'm in the situation here, I'm going through it, and I'm like, hey, I grew up seeing that. I know what that is. I used to have to cook that. We were taught how to make that. Oh, is that what that's for? And then you find out more about the belief systems. I'm like, oh, a whole bunch of questions got answered for me. And it was information that I needed. But there were other things too that needed to be addressed. And even though it was not my plan to go that way, evidently I'd come to a place in my life where it needed to be finally addressed, not only for myself, but also for my bloodline. So you have those situations too. I'm still Kemetic, first and foremost. Okay. And I should also say the one thing that I appreciate about the modern day practice of Kemetic tradition is that, and this is not casting any judgment on anybody because each tradition is different, okay? But we don't engage in animal sacrifice. Back in the day, they used to. We do not. Now, listen, back then when they did, the whole community got fed, or even if they did it for like in the temple. And so then they would take whatever was extra out to the community. In our tradition, at least in Shenu Temple, we use water, but also our biggest sacrifice is your actions that will help uplift humanity. Go volunteer time with this, do this, do free programs for whatever. Okay. Like I'll do some free programming for one of our local libraries. Donate food, things that are going to be a sacrifice of your time in a good way that is going to help elevate others. That's what's important. And I don't mean like, oh, well, that can of beans has been sitting in the back of my cabinet for a long time, about 6 months now. Let me go and donate it to the local food bank. Don't bring something you're not going to eat yourself, okay? And also, if it's not going out of your way, then just don't insult people like that, okay? You just keep that to yourself. And it's an insult, and it's not something that would be considered acceptable. I had somebody one time when she asked me about a situation, what she could do to remedy something, because we always talk about the remedy too. It's not a matter of, oh, here's the problem. Okay, so how do you fix it, right? So I did Oracle, and I said, okay, so you're going to need to go buy some food for somebody, all right? Like go to your local chicken shack and just offer to somebody who's in there and say, hey, I'm going to treat you to a meal today, right? Simple like that. That's not a really big deal. So she calls me. Can I just buy some McDonald's and just give to somebody on the street? I said, you were really given very specific instructions. Do I have to do that? Yeah. I mean, listen, you're grown. We all have choice. But what's more advisable is to do that. Now, because you don't know from being in that particular place what can happen. You don't know. It's not about, all right, I'm just going to do what's convenient for me. It's not sacrifice then. Just like not going out of your way to want to go and meet the person that you want to initiate you. All right. I mean, the willingness to give up what is comfortable for you in order to help somebody else. Roll up your sleeves. That's my biggest thing. Community work. The teachings that come out of Kemet talk about community work all of the time. There are folks who are just stuck in the temples and they just keep amongst themselves, and you don't see them out in the community doing anything because they feel they're too elitist and they don't want to get their hands dirty. Let me just tell you something. This is something that I've learned. And one of the reasons I actually did not want to become a queen mother that was conferred upon me. It was a ceremony, it was done. It was a surprise to me, but that's another whole thing. Because see, the more titles you get and the higher you get, the more work is expected of you. You may want people to be like bowing and scraping and all this other stuff. And I've said this before, it's not about that. It's not. You are in service. It's not about getting cute. Although in one of the sage books, it talks about the importance of dressing according to your station, well, let me clarify that. Because you can have somebody who is a floor washer, right? And think of our ancestors and going to church on Sundays. Okay, maybe they've been out in the field all week. Maybe they've been washing somebody's floors. Maybe they've been washing somebody's laundry. But then on Sunday, because they knew who they were, they put their Sunday best on and were strutting. Okay, that's my job, but that's not who I am. Okay, and I see myself with more value. That's what it means, dressing according to your station, as far as what's expected of you, right? And not saying, okay, I'm going to go to church or this special event wearing the clothes that I just cleaned the building with. No, it's dressing in accordance with who you know yourself to be from a dignified place. Okay. But anyway, I think I've said everything that I wanted to share regarding the situation with the Hoteps. Actually, they become known as the Ankhs and Hoteps, I believe. It's shameful because it really is a true desecration to the sacred traditions of our ancestors. This is holy. The word Jesser or Desher, both words mean sacred and holy. And that's what these teachings are. They really are. And there are various levels within. Okay. I'm at the path now of the Germae, which is it's the path of not just the high priest or priestess. This is really going within on a deeper level to be a better service to humanity, which requires a lot of ika, which is the word I found among many for yoga. Yoga is not a Sanskrit word. There's yuka, there's yuke, there's ika. I did the research to find out, okay? But it requires yoga and meditation, a lot of observation, stillness. I mentioned the other day that in the water tradition, water spirits actually like it quiet. Going to the water and bringing a whole group of drummers and jumping around and dancing and splashing all in the water and so forth, and then throwing your offerings in the water. This counters everything about what we believe. And this is not just in the Shona and Ndebele tradition. This is in general. If you really start digging in and you find out that quiet is something that is really prized. And the Germae is the silent-mouthed person who has gained mastery over his or her tongue, his or her emotions. Not saying that they become emotionless, because that is not realistic. And that's Kemetic. Those are Kemetic teachings too, about being in touch with your emotions, but also not letting them be your master. It is the spiritual person, the calling of the spiritual person who truly puts their work as a spiritual teacher, leader, ahead of everything, and really honing yourself, acknowledging the mistakes that you've made, acknowledging what has worked, what has not worked, and being ready to go to the next level. One of the things I teach to pray is Erdani Bunikai, take me to my higher place. My higher place. Okay? But there is an understanding that there is submitting to the will of your higher self, your kerit, all right? And being in complete alignment with your life path. And I for years was just so bent on making myself a huge success in show business, and really came to see that that was just not for me. Yes, I'm an artist. Yes, in various capacities, okay? But for me, if it's not related to the teaching and sharing of culture, and if it's not inspiring for people to reach to become, to reach more deeply, and to also reach up higher, um, and if it doesn't inspire, if it doesn't provoke thought in a way that's going to help to push you into being your best self, or either or make some kind of an observation about society that's going to affect how you approach society, then I'm not really interested in it at all. I'm also, as a teacher, as an art instructor, I'm really very keyed into the importance of teaching culture. And as a spiritual person, learning the best ways to help others to be able to get through a day, a week, get through trauma. And let me just touch on this also, because I've talked before about church hurt, and that we have ATR hurt. I'm listen. That's something I still deal with in therapy. Yeah, I'm a deep believer in therapy, um, because of things I've been exposed to that have ripped me open, and where I've had to basically put myself back together, or find somebody to help me, like a therapist, right? There have been a lot of horrific things that have happened in our ATR communities. Although it's not just the ATRs, because I have friends from all different backgrounds who have experienced abuse, whether it's physical, mental, financial, um, sexual, all of these. Mental manipulation, just, I mean, and when you are putting yourself out there for trusting someone to take you to that higher place, and they're just focused on using you as a tool, um, for whatever personal reasons. And if they do try to prop you up, that it's only to make themselves look good. Um, all this cuts deeply, because you're thinking that you're going into a situation where you have a spiritual family, and you find out these people are not your family. This leader who you think is of high ethical character, and you find out it's completely not. It's not like that. So dealing with all of those have given me a number of triggers and a number of fears. I'm still working through in therapy about who I should give information to, who I should take on as a student, who I should go ahead and send my books out to, because of the fact that there are people who just want to steal the information or use it to make themselves look good, when they don't have the training. It's been tough. Frankly, it's been pretty horrible. But I'm still here. Still here. And there's been a lot of good. I do have a lot of wonderful memories. I really do. And I do have some tremendous stories. I remember when Maya Tefnitcher, the first time I'd heard that he could do this. The first time I saw it, when I saw him be able to, he swished his ankh in the water and flipped it, and sparks flew out. I mean, it was nothing to him, just whoop, flip, like lightning bolts are coming out. I was like, wow, I heard he could do that. I finally saw it. And that's cool, but that's not the ultimate goal. And still, but I can still say that I have a lot of really powerful memories, beautiful memories But there's been a lot that I've had to and continue to work through. And the last thing that I want to do is to bring hurt to anybody else, simply because I know how that feels. And because it's been a growing process, and at first my modeling myself on what I had been through in the ATRs, not basing it on what I went through before that with my 13-year mentor, and even within the metaphysical church, having to go to school for 4 years. You're in that seminary, okay? 2 years required to become a healing minister, then another 2 then to become a fully licensed minister. You become a licensed healing minister, then also a licensed ordained minister. It's a process. It is a process. So I tried modeling myself after what I saw in the ATRs, where many of them were doing a year and a day for training and initiation. Came to realize this ain't gonna work. This don't work. This don't work, right? Okay. Next group, extended, 19 months. Wasn't good. Wasn't good. Again, a bunch of folks who I thought were one thing, and I found out that that all of them were just giving well, except for one, were giving lip service just so they could get that unk and so they could get that title. Okay. Then I'm thinking, all right, I'm not initiating anybody else. Okay. Then time goes by. Okay, you know what? I'm going to stick my toe in the water again, and okay, try with another group, and that. God. And then this one class has like extended, and it wasn't intentional. It was supposed to be a 7-month course, and it extended and extended. And of course, those who were supposed to be here, they're still here. And I'm going to tell you, the fact that they're still here says a lot. And they actually have gotten the best of me. And when they started with me, I thought, and I told them, you are getting the very best of me right now. You know, I really thought, oh, wow, I'm at the apex. I was not. And I was about to just hit bottom real quick because of my life stuff that I was going through. And so they've had to watch me rebuild myself. I mean, and this is, I've seen my teachers, the best of my teachers go through this too. So they hung in there. And as I've gotten stronger and learned even more, oh my goodness, I'm telling you that the students that I had from the early 2000s don't have any, not even a piece of this. The ones I've had from 10 years ago don't even have a piece of all the stuff that I've since learned. And this is not bragging. This is just talking about the process that I've been through and my being committed to learning more. So not only so I could be a better teacher, but so I could live my life in a better way and get the answers that I was looking for in the first place. And I'm going to tell you something. The reason that I ended up going to Kemetic faith, and I've shared this before, I was looking for a Babalao or Ianipa to teach me Yoruba, okay? And I've even been in Iles, I've been in, in the Asheshe tradition, also in Regla de Ocha, right? And they never gelled. They just didn't gel. I loved Orisha. I had relationships I built with the Orisha, but as far as that, it just didn't seem like it was my path as much as I really wanted it to be. I really did. And then when I came to the Kemetic, the only reason that I gave it a chance, because I was still looking for a Babalao, the only reason I gave it a chance was because this sister who was a priestess told me when she found out that I had epilepsy, she said, oh, well, you know, with our diet, you can get rid of that. Well, what kind of diet is that? Vegan. And if you can't do vegan, then vegetarian, but no meat. Wow. Okay, so I can get off this medication. I can. Oh, hey, hey, like they weren't talking about that with the other tradition. So, hey, okay. It was horrible. For the first time in my life, I ended up in the emergency room with nonstop seizures. And then a few years later, after I'd become a queen mother and then had my own temple, and again, nonstop seizures in the emergency room, emergency room. My members came to me and said, Queen Mother, we think you need to eat some chicken. I said, prove it to me, because they knew me. Bring me the receipts, okay? And they were ready. You know, this kind of diet is not really effective for you. And you see, you're always in the hospital, you know. They were right. They were right. But I was trying to hang in there because I thought that's what it was necessary to do to be Kemetic. And then years later, I find out that's not true. You know, I find the artwork where they're preparing meat. Okay, scenes of ancient Kemetic butchers, where they're hunting for fowl, and where they're fishing and all this. And then also I find this scripture that says, and this is the book of the book of Kati, where it says that God put fish, fowl, fruits of all kinds, here for man's sustenance or subsistence, as it said there. Nobody showed me this. Nobody told me this years ago. I was told that Kemites were vegan. It wasn't true. And I suffered for years trying to hang with this. And even though the evidence was right there, this is not working for you, I was still trying to hang in there because I was trying to be faithful to the tradition as it was taught to me. Research. That's your key. Experience. That's your other key. Good mentoring. That's another key. And a general consistent practice, no matter what ATR you're in. And I do want to say this regarding animal sacrificing, because again, I'm not knocking it. It's just not for me, and it's just not our way. But one of the most beautiful people I had met was in the Akan tradition. And I mean, he was always just so gerumae, he was very, very peaceful, very controlled, very happy, very sophisticated older brother, okay? Always immaculately attired. And so I said, tell me more about the Akan practice. And so he told me about it, and I wasn't feeling it, but I when you meet somebody who's got that energy that you want, right? I was like, maybe I should check that out, but then I finally asked him, I said, so what are you a priest? And so then he said, in their tradition, to a degree, it was his responsibility to prepare and let's just say prepare the animals that they used for offerings. Okay. I said, like you. He said, yes. I said, so what does that consist of? And so he said he had to go through special training, and that you have to have have exemplary character and sympathy and compassion for animals, and to do it in a way that is not torturing the animal, but and also being able to exude gratification to the animal. But above all, besides the technical aspect of it, what was required was a noble and honest character. And that's everything that this man exuded. I mean, always, at all times. I would have never guessed for him to say that to me, what he did, what it is, his role, So I just want to make sure that you understand. That's just not my path. But anyway, I've shared a lot with you. And I want to know if there's anything that you want to know, if there are any questions that you have at this point. I am going to tell you that I'm going to be, it's been made very, very clear to me. Originally I had it up on my website that you could take the Kemetic yoga classes online, but no. Also being able to get a Kemetic birth chart. Listen, y'all who have it, consider it a blessing, because from now on, only if you come into the tradition and you are baptized, and you have to go through the process. So after you go through the first process, that's when you can get your birth chart, but not anymore. Same thing with the Kemetic runes. That's for initiates. All right. So pulling back, because there are some things that are just too accessible. And just like I said, how there's certain knowledge the further in you go. That's truly information that is reserved for the process. It's for the process. Getting a name, all of that is part of the process. And that's out of respect also for the students who have been with me for a while, because this is information that they're just coming into, and they've been with me a while. So they've earned that right. And then when they become priestesses, then they'll be able to teach what they've learned from me. And the lineage part is highly important, and how we pass on, and who is called to pass on. And then, of course, I expect that each initiate will, or then priest or priestess will be able to take the tradition further in the same way that I did. This is why I teach about research, so you can go and get that information and apply it to your life. Now, also, it doesn't mean you're required to become a teacher. If you become initiated, if that's your calling, then that's great. But there is this pressure to be everything. Now, if you're reestablishing a tradition, then you do have to learn a lot. You have to learn how to speak the language. You have to learn the traditions. You have to learn history. You have to. There's so much. Learning the research, learning songs, writing songs. All because you're the establisher. You're creating sarud. You're establishing. I just bit my tongue. You're establishing. I'm going to stop talking. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Reverend Tamu, the truth is sometimes uncomfortable. And I look forward to when we're able to get together. And yes, from now on, because after I do this, these initiates, these students who have been with me, then after that, and it's only because of the fact that we've had a really established rapport. And again, but anyway, after this, if you want the lessons, if you're looking to become initiated, we have to do a reading to see if that's your calling. But if it is, then you got to come to me. We'll be able to do some things online, but you do have to have time where you spend with me. We're able to spend with each other. I want you to see how I live, okay? But I also want to be able to see if the person that I've been dealing with on the phone or on Zoom is the same when we're in each other's energy, okay? That's the way that it is from now on. Okay. One more time. Any questions? Any thoughts? Okay. Well, if you have any further questions, you can reach out to my website. Um, I will still do consultations. So, um, give thanks. You can visit my website, which will be changed this weekend because I'm pulling down things. Okay, so and tomorrow morning I'll be in the studio doing more recording. Kemetic chants. Imaku.info. For those in the area, next week I'll be on the 22nd. I'll be at Essex County College for the Africana Spirituality Conference, and I'll be speaking again this year. I'll be speaking about, excuse me, the female Kemetic warriors, their role, and how they have relevance in our lives in order to understand how to respect ourselves, spiritually protect ourselves, and to protect the community. Oh God, I have water sitting right here. Excuse me. Okay. And it'll be a full day. It'll be from 11 to, I think, 5, 11 to 4 or 5. So there'll be a number of different speakers. And I'm not sure what time I'll be going on. But for those of you who are in the area, it's free. And I'll be posting information on my social media. Okay. Okay. So with that, let's say Meria, which means much love. Heri, which means be at peace. Teni, which means to be accountable. Jebewi. Wait, I forgot to tell you a story. This I need to say. This is also from one of my mentors. Yeah, he was a mentor, but he's also an offshoot of one of the lineage. I'm part of his lineage too. And that's because my Tefnachur was actually in 2 lineages. So as a result, that means that I'm in relation to that, I'm in 2. So with this one contacted me, and he's transitioned, and his wife is still here, and so I'm not going to say his name, but he is well known. And he just got into the place where he just started calling me just to have conversation because he realized I knew some stuff. Okay, but I saw he knew some stuff. So, I started doing like I found that my students would do to me, because people would tell me, Queen Mother, when I talk to you on the phone, I always keep a notebook and pen handy because you always drop so much information. So here I'm having these wonderful conversations with this high priest in the Kemetic tradition. And I started doing the same thing, like, excuse me, could you say that again? But also I was able to straighten out some of the myths that I heard about him. Like I had heard that he entered a ceremony levitating his wasp staff, right? So then he said, I don't know how that story got around. He said, no, that didn't happen. But also he filled me in on a lot of the early history. Wow. I'm trying to tell you, if I told you everything, there might be a riot that starts, because it's so mind blowing. I mean, it's there's a lot of stuff that's infuriating, frustrating. Good Lord. Mm, 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 mm. Yeah, I'm glad I know the truth though, because you should know what the foundations of the resurrection of a tradition, and the players and the outcomes. You know, when people approach African traditional spirituality, or this actually is true for anything, you can be a minister and have this, where you're just thinking about yourself and you're not thinking about the outcome. But it's just like when you've got dealers on the street, they're not thinking about what they're doing to their people. They're just thinking about that bottom line here. You know, I've said this for a while. I know it's time for us to take into account how we've been poisoned in our community in so many ways. So many ways. And I'm going to go back to the whole thing about therapy. I believe therapy is really important with somebody who gets you, right? I'm blessed that I've had therapists where I could just openly talk about my faiths and also the ups and downs that I've been through and how it has impacted me, and how I can identify the various triggers, and also understanding that the healing time is a process. It's not like this. It's just not. And so in the same way that you have to work on yourself with your spirituality, you've got to work on your healing too. And, if you have a broken arm, you can't be expected to get up and play basketball, right? You've broken your leg. You can't expect to get up and run in a race. You have to honor the healing process. If you've got a big giant gash, you can't just, it is bleeding out, right? And you can't just pretend that it's not there or just put a Band-Aid on it and think that it's going to be okay. Honor your healing process. Take your healing and your spirituality seriously. All of your experiences, honor them. See what works, what you want to move forward with, what you need to be more compassionate about, what you need to have deeper understanding of. But be kind to yourself. In fact, there is one more thing I need to say. In the book of Amenemapet, it says, "Make not to turn aside from his duty a servant of God to do what is profitable to another man." In other words, do not pull somebody who is on their sacred path that is in service to the divine into something that is to your advantage. Okay? Let me give you like a small example. You've got somebody who was writing this book, working on this book, and you observe like, wow, you can type really fast. And you approach the person and say, I have to turn in this term paper for school, and I'm really having some problems. I see you type so fast. Can you please help me? Please, 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 please. In the meantime, this person's got a deadline, but you don't care. You see your bottom line, you see what they can do for you, and you pull them completely away from what they're doing. That's selfish. Anytime you want to exploit the talents and abilities of a holy person in order to do something that is completely off of their path in order to help you on yours, then you need to check yourself, because there are repercussions that do come from that too. Lastly, the book of Amenemapet. Be kind to yourself. Make your body strong and happy. Okay? But take good heed to what is good for yourself in respect of the divine. And why is that? Because the divine is within you and also without. And you are a part of the greater scheme of things. The symbiotic nature of our lives, being in alignment with our purpose, being in alignment with the energy of our community and making it a better place if it needs to be elevated, just making ourselves better and understanding that we are worth it because of the fact that we are creations of the divine, and because we are also creating our own reality in partnership with the divine. So with that, be kind to yourself. And Mereya, which means much love. Heri, which means be at peace. Teni, which means to be accountable. Jebewi, which means to be merciful and compassionate, applied in the right ways. And Men Nichim, which means stay sweet. Much love.